The silver ribbons bound Celine Corvin's wrists like shackles, beautiful and cruel, symbols of an Omega's duty to sacrifice herself for pack politics. She stood beneath the Moon Temple's ancient dome, surrounded by witnesses who saw not a woman with dreams of her own, but a vessel, a bartered peace treaty in human form. The elders had taught her well. An Omega's purpose was to submit, to bear strong pups, to mend the wounds of others, while silently bearing her own. Tonight, she would be given to a man whose cold eyes had assessed her like livestock, whose touch made her wolf whimper in distress rather than recognition. Her father called it honor. Her pack called it necessity. Celine called it surrender. The final extinguishing of the tiny flame she'd guarded in her heart, the one that still dared to believe in choice, in passion, in a mate who would see her as something precious rather than merely useful. But fate, it seemed, had written a different story in the stars above. As the ceremonial candles flickered and the wedding chants began, a howl split the night. Primal, commanding, undeniable. The temple doors shattered beneath the force of destiny, and in their place stood a figure straight from legend. The Alpha King himself, golden eyes burning with purpose, presence crackling with power that made every wolf present bare their throat in instinct. In that suspended moment, as his gaze locked with hers across the sacred circle, Celine felt something ancient stir within her soul, a recognition that transcended pack laws and arranged marriages. The ribbon binding her to duty suddenly felt fragile against the invisible threads already beginning to weave between them, connecting two souls that had perhaps always been meant to find each other, despite the kingdoms and prophecies that stood in their way. What Celine didn't know, as the Alpha King strode toward her with the determination of a predator claiming what was rightfully his, was that this moment of chaos would be but the first step on a journey that would test not just their growing bond, but the very foundations upon which the 7 territories had been built. Before we begin, remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Every day, a new story awaits you. Now, let us begin. The sweet scent of moon lilies filled the ancient temple, their silvery petals glowing beneath the stained glass dome, where moonlight filtered through in prismatic beams. Celine Corvin stood motionless at the center of the sacred circle, her shoulders heavy with the ceremonial cloak that seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. Her eyes remained downcast, fixed on the intricate floor patterns beneath her bare feet, patterns that had witnessed countless unions throughout the centuries. None, she suspected, as loveless as hers was about to be. "Look at me, child," Elder Thalia whispered, her weathered hands binding Celine's wrists with the traditional silver ribbons. "This is your duty. This is your honor. Honor." The word tasted bitter in Celine's mouth. What honor was there in being bartered away to secure a treaty? What honor in belonging to a man she'd met only twice? A man whose cold eyes had assessed her like livestock at auction. "Yes, Elder," she replied, the perfect picture of Omega submission. Her voice never wavered, never betrayed the storm raging inside her chest. In the front row, her father stood proud, his chest puffed with self-importance. This alliance with the Stone Ridge Pack would double his territory, strengthen his bloodline, and earn him favor with the Council of Alphas. All it cost him was a daughter, his youngest, weakest daughter, an Omega, a bargaining chip. The great doors of the Moon Temple swung open, allowing the assembled pack members to file in. Celine could smell their curiosity, their excitement, some genuine, some merely performative. The wedding of an Omega to an allied Alpha's son was cause for celebration, after all. Nobody needed to know the groom was 38 years older than his 17-year-old bride. "Stand taller," Elder Thalia instructed, adjusting Celine's ceremonial veil. "You represent your pack today." Celine straightened her spine, feeling the weight of expectations settle between her shoulder blades. The ribbons around her wrists tightened slightly, a physical reminder of her bonds, to family, to pack, to duty. Marcus Greystone entered the temple, flanked by his father and 2 beta guards. His salt and pepper hair was slicked back, his ceremonial furs adorned with the teeth of his conquests. His eyes found Celine immediately, possessive and hungry. "A fine match," someone whispered behind her. "She'll give him strong pups." Celine suppressed a shudder. She'd been told what to expect on her wedding night. The elders had prepared her with clinical efficiency, explaining how an Omega's first mating would forge an unbreakable bond. Once marked, she would belong to Marcus until death. Her body would attune to his, Her cycle would match his ruts. Her very existence would revolve around his needs and desires. Marcus approached the altar, his steps measured and confident. He took his position opposite her, close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath, the underlying musk of an alpha preparing to claim. "She's lovelier than promised," he told her father, speaking as if Celine weren't present. "Though a bit thin. We'll fatten her up before breeding season." Her father laughed, a false, ingratiating sound. "She eats like a bird, but she's fertile." The pack healer confirmed it. Celine closed her eyes briefly, mortified. She was nothing more than a broodmare to them, a vessel for continuing bloodlines. Her talents as a healer, her dreams of studying with the renowned healers in the Western Territories, none of that mattered. She was an Omega. Her only value lay in submission and reproduction. High Priestess Helena stepped forward, her ceremonial staff tapping against the marble floor 3 times. "We gather beneath the full moon," she intoned, her voice echoing through the temple, "to witness the joining of 2 packs through sacred bond and blood oath." Celine kept her breathing steady, forcing her mind to detach from what was happening. This was merely a transaction. She would endure as she always had. Perhaps Marcus would be kind. Perhaps he would allow her some freedoms. Perhaps. The first tremor was so subtle that Celine thought she'd imagined it. A slight vibration beneath her feet, easily dismissed as nerves. But then it came again, stronger, followed by a low, distant sound that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. Howls, not the celebratory howls of a wedding party. These were different, deeper, wilder, more primal, the sound of predators approaching prey. The temple doors shuddered. Several guests turned in alarm. Marcus's father stepped forward, hand moving toward the ceremonial dagger at his belt. "What is the meaning of this?" High Priestess Helena demanded, her voice faltering slightly. The answer came in the form of splintering wood and shattering glass. The great doors of the Moon Temple burst inward with such force that fragments of ancient oak scattered across the marble floor like deadly confetti. Moonlight flooded in, silhouetting a massive figure at the threshold. Even before he stepped into the light, Celine knew who he was. Every wolf in the territory knew the scent, the presence, the sheer, overwhelming power of Alpha King Darien Kale. He entered alone, though Celine could sense his warriors outside. He didn't need an escort. The king stood nearly 7 feet tall in his human form, his shoulders broad enough to fill the doorway. His black hair was pulled back, revealing sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw darkened with stubble. But it was his eyes that captured Celine, amber and gold, like sunlight through whiskey, with the vertical pupils of a wolf ready to shift. "This ceremony is over," he announced, his voice deceptively soft. He didn't need to shout. Every ear in the temple strained to catch his words. Marcus's father stepped forward. "King Kale, this is a private ceremony between allied packs. You have no jurisdiction." "I said," the king repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl that made even the bravest alphas flinch. "This ceremony is over." Celine felt something stir within her. Not her wolf, who had always been quiet and submissive, but something deeper, more instinctual, a recognition, a pull. Her eyes met the king's, and for one suspended moment, the rest of the world seemed to fade away. He crossed the temple in long strides, ignoring the protests of elders and the threatening postures of Marcus's guards. When he reached Celine, he stopped, studying her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You will not belong to him," he said simply. Then he touched the ribbons binding her wrists. Heat seared through the silver threads, burning them away without harming her skin. The ceremonial bonds fell to the floor in ashen strips. "What do you think you're doing?" Marcus snarled, lunging forward only to be stopped by an invisible wall of alpha power that radiated from Darien in palpable waves. "She's promised to me. The alliance is sealed." Darien didn't even glance at him. His eyes remained fixed on Celine's face, searching for something. "Do you want this marriage, Omega?" he asked, his voice gentler than she would have expected from such a fearsome ruler. The temple fell silent. No one ever asked an Omega what they wanted, especially not in matters of pack alliances. Celine's throat went dry. She was aware of her father's warning glare, of Marcus's mounting rage, of the hundreds of eyes watching this unprecedented scene unfold. "No," she whispered, the single word both terrifying and liberating. "I don't want this." A ghost of a smile touched the king's lips. Then it will not happen. Marcus growled, his face contorting with fury. You can't interfere with pack business. The council will hear of this. The council, Darian replied calmly, answers to me. He turned to address the stunned assembly. This Omega will not be traded like cattle. She will not be forced into a loveless union for political gain. The practice ends today. Celine's father pushed forward. She's my daughter. I decide her fate. Something dangerous flashed in Darian's eyes. No longer. Before anyone could react, the king turned back to Celine. With one fluid motion, he swept aside her ceremonial veil, exposing her neck. Then he bent down, his breath warm against her skin, and whispered words meant for her alone. Forgive me. This is the only way to protect you. His teeth found the junction between her neck and shoulder, the sacred spot where a mate's mark would bind them together for life. Pain bloomed, sharp and bright, followed by a rush of sensation so intense that Celine's knees buckled. The king caught her easily, supporting her weight as his mark seared into her flesh, into her soul. Gasps and cries of outrage echoed through the temple. To mark an Omega without consent or ceremony was forbidden. To steal another Alpha's promised mate was an act of war. Yet as the king's mark settled into her skin, Celine felt something unexpected, a sense of rightness, of belonging. Her wolf, normally so quiet, howled in triumph deep within her. Darian straightened, his arm still supporting her waist. A drop of her blood stained his lower lip, making him look wilder, more dangerous. She bears my mark now, he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the temple. Any who challenge this claim challenge the throne itself. Marcus lunged forward with a roar, partially shifting in his rage. His claws extended, aiming for Celine's throat, but before they could connect, Darian moved with impossible speed. One moment he stood beside Celine. The next, he had Marcus pinned against a marble column, one hand wrapped around the other Alpha's throat. She is under my protection, Darian said, each word precise and deadly. Touch her, and your bloodline ends today. He released Marcus, who collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. The king turned back to Celine, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. Come, he said, extending his hand. We leave now. Celine hesitated, caught between worlds. Behind her lay the only life she'd ever known, constrained and predetermined, but familiar. Before her stood a stranger offering freedom through another form of bondage. But when she looked into Darian's eyes, she saw something beyond the fearsome Alpha King of legend, something almost vulnerable. Celine placed her hand in his fingers closed around hers, warm and strong. Without another word, he led her from the temple, past the shocked faces of guests and family, into the cool night air, where the full moon bathed everything in silver light. Outside, dozens of massive wolves waited, their eyes gleaming in the darkness. They parted to let their king pass, some bowing their heads to Celine in a gesture of respect she'd never experienced as an Omega. Why? She finally asked, her voice barely audible as they reached the edge of the temple grounds. Why did you do this? Darian stopped, turning to face her fully. The moonlight carved his features into sharp relief, highlighting the power and burden of his position. Because you're more important than you know, he said finally, and because no one should be forced to mate without love. A black stallion waited at the bottom of the temple steps. With surprising gentleness, Darian lifted Celine onto its back before mounting behind her. Rest now, he said, his arms encircling her as he took the reins. We have a long journey ahead. As they rode away, Celine touched the mark on her neck, still sensitive, still sending waves of unfamiliar warmth through her body. She didn't understand what had happened, or why the king had claimed her. She only knew that her fate, once sealed with ribbons of silver, had been rewritten with a mark of blood and moonlight. Behind them, the howls of outrage faded into the night. Before them lay the unknown, a kingdom, a destiny, and perhaps, Celine dared to think, a chance at something more than mere survival. The black forest stretched before them like a living thing, ancient trees reaching skyward with gnarled branches that blocked out the stars. Their path wound through shadow and moonlight, the steady rhythm of hoofbeats the only sound in the preternatural silence. Celine sat rigid in the saddle, her body achingly aware of the Alpha King behind her, His warmth, his scent, the steady beat of his heart against her back. His mark throbbed on her neck, a constant reminder of what had happened in the Moon Temple. With each passing mile, the bond between them strengthened, weaving invisible threads that connected her to this stranger in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. She could sense his emotions now, not clearly, not completely, but enough to catch the edges of his thoughts. Determination, purpose, and beneath it all, a strange undercurrent of concern. "We'll stop at the river," Darian said, his breath warm against her ear. "The warriors need to rest, and you should eat." Selena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. 100 questions burned on her tongue, each more urgent than the last. Why had he marked her? What did he mean when he said she was more important than she knew? Where were they going? What would happen to her now? But fear kept her silent. Despite his unexpected gentleness, Darian Kale was still the Alpha King, the most feared ruler in all 7 territories. His reputation for ruthless justice and unbending will had spread far beyond his borders. Some called him the Shadow King, others the Blood Alpha. All feared him, and now she wore his mark. The war party reached a clearing beside a wide, swift-running river just as the first hint of dawn lightened the eastern sky. Warriors dismounted with fluid grace, some shifting to wolf form to patrol the perimeter, others setting up a small camp with practiced efficiency. No one spoke. They communicated with hand signals and subtle gestures, moving like shadows through the trees. Darian lifted Selene from the horse, his hands strong and steady around her waist. Her legs nearly buckled when they touched the ground, stiff from hours of riding. The king steadied her with a hand on her arm, his touch sending electric shocks through her body. The mark responded, pulsing with warmth. "Come," he said simply, guiding her toward a small fire that had been kindled at the center of the clearing. A warrior approached them, tall and lean with a jagged scar bisecting his left cheek. He bowed his head slightly to Darian, eyes flickering briefly to Selene before returning to his king. "The area is secured, my lord," he reported. "No scent of Stone Ridge or Corvin warriors yet, but they'll be coming." "I know," Darian replied. "Double the perimeter guards, Rowan. We move again in 2 hours." Rowan nodded, his gaze returning to Selene with barely concealed curiosity. "And the Omega?" "My mate," Darian corrected, his voice carrying a hint of warning that made even Selene's wolf want to bare her throat in submission. "Will remain with me." Mate. The word echoed through Selene's mind. Not prisoner, not captive, not even servant. Mate. Rowan's eyebrows rose slightly, but he merely nodded again, before moving away to carry out his king's orders. When they were alone again, Darian guided Selene to sit on a fallen log near the fire. A young wolf approached with a water skin and a small bundle of food wrapped in cloth. She kept her eyes downcast as she offered them to Selene, her movements quick and nervous. "Thank you," Selene said softly, accepting the gifts. The girl looked up, startled by the words. Her eyes were wide and amber-flecked, her hair a tangle of autumn red. She couldn't have been more than 14 or 15 years old. "You're welcome, my lady," she whispered, the title clearly unfamiliar on her tongue. She glanced at Darian, who was watching the exchange with an unreadable expression, then quickly backed away. "Eat," Darian told Selene. "You'll need your strength." She unwrapped the bundle to find dried meat, hard cheese, and a small piece of dark bread. Simple fare, but her stomach growled at the sight. She hadn't eaten since early the previous day, too nervous about her wedding to choke down breakfast. Her wedding. The thought hit her with unexpected force. Just yesterday, she had been preparing to become the mate of Marcus Greystone, resigned to a life of dutiful submission. Now she sat beside a campfire in the wilderness, marked by the Alpha King himself, her future a vast unknown. The enormity of it threatened to overwhelm her. "You have questions," Darian said, settling beside her on the log. Not too close. He left space between them, respecting boundaries that his mark had already crossed. Selene swallowed her bite of cheese. "Many," she admitted. "Ask." She looked at him directly for the first time since they'd left the temple. In the firelight, his features seemed softer, less severe. The golden eyes that had seemed so intimidating now reflected flames and starlight. "Why me?" she finally said, the simplest and most complex question of all. Darian's gaze shifted to the fire. For a long moment he was silent, and Selene feared he might not answer. When he spoke, His voice was low, meant for her alone. "There is a prophecy," he began, "passed down through generations of royal blood. When the blood moon rises in the 10th year of Shadow's reign, only the healer's heart can prevent the fall of kingdoms." Celine frowned. "I don't understand. What does that have to do with me?" 10 years ago, I took the throne," Darian continued. "The blood moon rises in 3 days' time. And you, Celine Corvin, are the only Omega healer born to a pure bloodline in 7 generations." Her breath caught. It was true that Omega healers were rare. Their gifts often manifested as simple nurturing abilities rather than true healing power. But Celaena's talents went far beyond the ordinary. She could heal with a touch, mend broken bones, cure fevers, even ease the pain of childbirth. Her abilities had always been exceptional. "You marked me because of a prophecy?" she asked, disbelief coloring her voice. "I marked you to protect you," he corrected. "Your father was selling you to the Stone Ridge Pack. Do you know why?" Celine looked down. "For an alliance. For land and hunting rights." "No." Darian's voice hardened. "He was selling you to Marcus Greystone because Greystone promised to hand you over to those who would use your gifts for dark purposes. There are those who believe an Omega healer's power can be harvested, amplified, twisted." Horror washed over Celine. "That's not possible." "It has been done before," Darian said grimly. "Centuries ago during the Blood Wars. Omega healers were captured, their powers corrupted through dark rituals. What should have healed instead destroyed. Entire packs were decimated by plagues that targeted specific bloodlines." Celine's hands trembled as she set down her food. "And Marcus, my father. They planned to. Your father was approached by agents of the Crimson Dawn, a cult that has existed in shadows for generations, waiting for the prophecy to align. They offered him wealth beyond imagining. All he had to do was ensure you were delivered to the Stone Ridge Pack on the new moon." "No," Celine whispered. But even as she denied it, she knew it was true. Her father's sudden insistence on the marriage, the rushed ceremony, his dismissal of her pleas, it all made sense now. He wouldn't sacrifice me. I'm his daughter. "You're an Omega," Darian said simply. "In his eyes you exist to serve pack interests." The truth of his words cut deep. All her life, Celine had been valued only for what she could provide. Her healing gifts, her potential to bear strong cubs, her role as a bargaining chip in pack politics. Never for herself, never for who she was. "The mark," she said suddenly, her hand going to her neck. "You said it was to protect me. How?" Darian's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "An alpha's mark creates a bond that cannot be broken by outside forces. It ties our life forces together. If you die, I weaken. If I die," he paused. "If I die, you would survive, but the pain would be significant. So I'm bound to you now," Celine said, a statement rather than a question. "Yes, forever." "Yes." Celine stared into the fire, processing all she'd learned. Part of her wanted to rage against this fate decided without her consent. Another form of control, another denial of choice. But another part, a quieter part, whispered that this mark might be the first time someone had valued her for her true worth. Not as a broodmare or a servant, but as a healer, as someone important. "What happens now?" she finally asked. "We travel to my territory," Darian replied. "The fortress there is the most defensible position in all 7 lands. Once you're safely inside, we prepare for what comes." "And what comes, my lord?" His golden eyes reflected the firelight as he looked at her. "War." The word hung between them, heavy with promise and threat. "The Stone Ridge Pack and your father's wolves will come for you," Darian continued. "But they are merely the visible enemies. Behind them stands the Crimson Dawn, and their reach extends far beyond what you can imagine." "Will they attack your fortress?" Celine asked, fear threading through her voice. "They'll try," Darian said, a hint of grim amusement coloring his words. "They won't succeed." His confidence should have been reassuring, but Celine felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "All of this because of me," she whispered. "Because of a prophecy I didn't even know existed." Darian was silent for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, he reached out and touched her hand. The briefest contact, gone almost before she registered it. "Not because of you," he said quietly. "For you." Before she could respond, Rowan approached again, his expression tense. "My lord," he said urgently. "Scouts report movement to the south. At least 20 wolves moving fast. Darian stood immediately, all softness vanishing from his features. Stone Ridge? Yes, and Corvin wolves among them. They've picked up our trail. The Alpha King's eyes hardened to molten gold. Break camp. We ride in 5 minutes. As the clearing erupted into controlled activity, Darian turned back to Celine. Stay close to me, he ordered. No longer the patient explainer, but the commanding ruler. If we're separated, find Rowan. He'll protect you with his life. Celine nodded, struggling to keep her fear contained. Everything was happening too fast. The revelation about the prophecy, the danger, the mark still burning on her neck. She felt like she was drowning, pulled under by currents too powerful to fight. Celine, Darian's voice cut through her rising panic. Look at me. She raised her eyes to his, surprised by the intensity she found there. I will not let them take you, he said, each word a vow. Do you understand? You are under my protection now. Nothing will harm you while I draw breath. The conviction in his voice steadied her, and beneath it, through their fledgling bond, she sensed something else, something that felt remarkably like concern, not for a prophecy or a political advantage, but for her. I understand, she whispered. Within minutes, they were mounted and moving again, the war party flowing through the forest like water over stone. Darian kept Celine close, his arms a protective cage around her as they rode. Behind them, the howls of pursuing wolves echoed through the trees, growing closer with each passing hour. By midday, they reached the edge of Darian's territory, marked by a swift-running river and a line of ancient standing stones carved with runes. As they crossed this boundary, Celine felt something change in the air, a sensation of entering a place more heavily protected than mere physical defenses could explain. Blood wards, Darian explained, sensing her reaction. They recognize those of my pack and alert us to intruders. Will they stop our pursuers? Celine asked hopefully. No, he replied, but they'll slow them and warn us of their approach. We still have several hours' ride to the fortress. They pushed on without rest, the terrain growing steeper as they entered the foothills of the Iron Mountains. The forest thinned, giving way to rocky slopes and narrow paths that wound between sheer cliffs. It was defensible territory, easy to guard, difficult to attack. Celine began to understand why Darian's kingdom had remained unconquered for so long. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Selene caught her first glimpse of their destination. The fortress rose from the mountainside as if it had grown there, all black stone and soaring towers, with walls that gleamed like obsidian in the fading light. Unlike the graceful spires of her homepack's dwellings, this structure was built for war, every angle designed to repel attackers, every tower positioned for maximum visibility. Shadow Keep, Darian said, a note of pride in his voice. Home. Home. The word sounded strange to Celine's ears. Would this imposing fortress become her home now? This land of warriors and stone, so far from the forests and meadows she had known all her life? As they approached the massive gates, horns sounded from the watchtowers. The gates swung open, revealing a courtyard filled with more warriors than Celine had ever seen gathered in one place. They stood at attention as their king rode in, their faces solemn and curious as they caught sight of Celine. Darian dismounted first, then lifted Celine down beside him. She felt hundreds of eyes on her, assessing, wondering, an Omega in their midst. And not just any Omega, but one who bore their king's mark. A tall female wolf approached, her posture radiating authority. Her hair was silver despite her youthful face, pulled back in a severe braid that emphasized her sharp cheekbones and penetrating gray eyes. My king, she said, bowing her head slightly. We received word of your approach. Lyra, Darian acknowledged. Prepare the east wing for my mate, and summon the council immediately. Lyra's eyes widened fractionally as she looked at Celine, taking in the fresh mark visible on her neck. Mate, she repeated, her tone carefully neutral. Of course, my lord. She gestured to several attendants who hurried forward. These will see to your mate's needs while you meet with the council. Darian shook his head. She stays with me. Surprise flickered across Lyra's face before she composed her features once more. As you wish, my king. As they followed Lyra into the fortress, Selene felt the weight of her new reality settling more firmly on her shoulders. Mate to the Alpha King, subject of an ancient prophecy, target of a dangerous cult. It seemed impossible that just yesterday she had been preparing for a different fate entirely. The interior of Shadowkeep surprised her. While the exterior promised nothing but military strength, inside she found unexpected beauty. Tapestries depicting forest scenes and legendary battles hung from stone walls. Fireplaces burned cheerfully in large open chambers. Windows of colored glass cast rainbow patterns across polished floors. They were led to a circular room high in the central tower. A massive round table dominated the space, carved from a single piece of ancient wood and inlaid with a map of the 7 territories. Around it stood 12 chairs, each bearing different symbols. The council chamber, Darian explained as they entered, where all major decisions affecting the kingdom are made. By you? Celine asked. The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been the ghost of a smile. By us. I may be king, but I'm not a tyrant. Each member of the council represents a different aspect of our society. Warriors, healers, teachers, providers. This contradicted everything Celine had heard about the fearsome Alpha King who ruled with an iron fist. Before she could question him further, the council members began to arrive. They entered in pairs, male and female representatives from each faction. They varied in age and appearance, but all carried themselves with the same quiet confidence. Each bowed to Darian before taking their seat. Their curious gazes lingered on Celine, though none dared to question her presence openly. When all were seated, Darian remained standing, Celine beside him. The room fell silent, waiting. 3 nights ago, the king began without preamble. I received intelligence that the Stone Ridge Pack had aligned with the Crimson Dawn. Their target, an Omega healer from the Corvin Pack, promised in marriage to secure their alliance. Murmurs rose around the table. Several council members exchanged alarmed glances. The prophecy, one elderly female said, her eyes sharp as she studied Celine. The 10th year, the blood moon. Yes, Darian confirmed. All signs align, which is why I intervened personally. He placed his hand on Celine's shoulder, the touch sending warmth cascading through her body. This is Celine Corvin, daughter of Alpha Corvin of the Southern Forests. She is a true healer, and she now bears my mark. The council chamber erupted in voices, some alarmed, others approving. Darian raised his hand, and silence fell immediately. I know this action brings risk, he continued. The Stone Ridge Pack and Corvins will see it as an act of war, but we all know what would happen if the Crimson Dawn acquired an Omega healer on the eve of the blood moon. Destruction, a burly male wolf said grimly. The prophecy is clear. Rivers will run red with the blood of the innocent, and darkness will reign for 1,000 years. Celine shivered at the words. This was the part Darian hadn't shared with her, the consequences of failure. We've prepared for this moment for generations, Darian said. Our fortifications are strong, our warriors ready, but now we must accelerate our plans. The enemy will be at our gate sooner than we anticipated. And what of your mate, my king? Lyra asked, her gaze resting on Celine. What role does she play in our defense? All eyes turned to Celine, and she fought the urge to shrink back. These wolves looked to her for salvation, for the fulfillment of a prophecy she'd learned about only hours ago. My mate, Darian said, emphasizing the word, needs time to understand her position and her powers. She will be treated with the respect due to your queen. Queen. The word sent a jolt through Celine's body. Of course, if she was truly Darian's mate, that made her queen of his territories. For now, Darian continued, our priority is defense. Double the guards on all approaches. Send word to our allied packs, and prepare the inner sanctum. If the worst should come, we'll need a place of final retreat. The council nodded in unison, their expressions grim, but determined. One by one, they rose and left, each with assigned tasks to complete. Soon only Lyra remained, her gray eyes still assessing Celine with careful neutrality. The East Wing is ready whenever you wish to retire, my king, she said. I've assigned our most trusted guards to the corridor. Darian nodded. Thank you, Lyra. Send Rowan to me when he returns from scouting. When they were alone, Celine finally gave voice to the question that had been building since the council meeting began. Queen? She whispered. I'm to be your queen? Darian turned to her, his expression softening slightly. You bear my mark, he said simply. That makes you my mate in the eyes of pack law. But we don't even know each other, Celine protested. This was for protection, for the prophecy. You can't mean to actually... She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Darian watched her carefully. something unreadable flickering in his golden eyes. "The mark is real," he said finally. "The bond is forming whether we wish it or not. I won't lie to you, Celine. I didn't plan this. When I learned of the Crimson Dawn's plot, I intended only to bring you to Shadowkeep for protection. But when I saw you in that temple, bound in silver, and resigned to a fate you didn't choose..." He paused, his jaw tightening. No one should be forced to mate without love, not even for pack survival. The words struck Celine deeply. All her life she had been told that personal desires were secondary to pack needs, especially for an Omega. Yet here was the fearsome Alpha King, defender of tradition and strength, speaking of love as if it mattered. "The mark was the only way to ensure your father and Greystone couldn't legally reclaim you," Darien continued. "But I won't force more than that. You may be my mate in name and bond, but I won't claim you fully unless you choose it." Relief flooded through Celine, followed quickly by confusion. The mark on her neck pulsed with a desire that wasn't entirely her own, the mating bond already working to draw them together. How long could either of them resist its pull? Before she could form a response, the chamber door burst open. Rowan stood in the entrance, his face grim, his clothing torn and bloody. "My king," he gasped. "They're coming. An army unlike any I've seen. Stone Ridge, Corvin, and at least 3 other packs, all marching under a crimson banner." Darien's expression hardened instantly. "How many?" "Hundreds," Rowan replied. "And they have weapons, silver-tipped spears, wolfsbane arrows. They're prepared for siege." The Alpha King's eyes flashed with golden fire. "Then siege is what they'll get. Sound the alarms. Seal the gates. Every warrior to their position." As Rowan rushed to carry out his orders, Darien turned back to Celine. "You should rest while you can," he said, his voice gentler than his fierce expression would suggest. "The East Wing is the most protected part of the fortress. Lyra will show you—" "No," Celine interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. "I'm a healer. If there's to be battle, I should prepare. I can help the wounded." Darien studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. Lyra will show you to the healing chambers, but promise me you'll stay within the fortress walls. The Crimson Dawn wants you alive, but our other enemies would be just as satisfied to see you dead." "I promise," Celine said, meeting his gaze steadily. For a brief moment, something passed between them through their fledgling bond. Respect, perhaps, or understanding. Then Darien turned away, already shifting into the role of commander, as the first warning horns echoed through Shadowkeep. War had come, just as he had predicted, and Celine, Omega, healer, reluctant queen, stood at its center, bound by prophecy, and marked by the Alpha King himself. The blood moon hung in the night sky like a wounded eye, casting an eerie crimson glow over Shadowkeep. 7 days had passed since Celine's arrival. 7 days of siege, of constant attacks repelled, of growing tension within the fortress walls. She stood at the window of the highest tower, watching as waves of enemy wolves crashed against the outer defenses. The Crimson Dawn had brought more than just the Stone Ridge and Corvin packs. They'd rallied allies from all territories, promising power and prosperity once the prophecy was fulfilled. Their true intentions remained hidden from most. Only those in Darien's inner circle knew the cult planned to corrupt Celine's healing gifts, twisting them into weapons that could target specific bloodlines. With such power, they could eliminate rivals, topple royal lines, and reshape the 7 territories according to their vision. "You shouldn't be here," Darien's voice came from behind her. "The tower is too exposed." Celine didn't turn from the window. "I can see everything from here. I need to understand what we're facing." The Alpha King moved to stand beside her, his golden eyes reflecting the bloody moonlight. In the days since their arrival, their bond had strengthened, despite both their efforts to maintain distance. She could sense his exhaustion now, the weight of responsibility he carried, the constant vigilance that allowed no rest. "The inner walls will hold," he said, though Celine caught the note of concern beneath his confident words. "They've withstood worse." "Have they?" she asked softly. Darien's jaw tightened. "No," he admitted after a moment. "Not like this. Not with silver and wolfsbane and dark magic at their disposal." Below them, a section of the outer wall erupted in flames as the attackers launched flaming projectiles. Warriors rushed to extinguish the blaze before it could spread, their movements coordinated and efficient despite days of relentless assault. "Your people fight well," Selene observed. "They fight for survival," Darian replied. "The Crimson Dawn has made no secret of what will happen to any who stand with us." Selene shivered, remembering the fate of the small village that had refused to grant the enemy army passage. Not one soul had been left alive. Men, women, children, all slaughtered to send a message. The refugees who'd made it to Shadowkeep had brought stories that haunted her dreams. "How much longer can we hold?" she asked. Darian's eyes met hers, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw naked worry there. 3 days, perhaps 4. They've blocked our supply routes. Food and medicine are already being rationed. And then? Then we retreat to the inner sanctum and make our final stand. Selene turned fully toward him, studying the face that had become increasingly familiar to her. In the past week, they'd spent hours in council meetings, planning defenses, caring for wounded warriors. Despite his fearsome reputation, she'd seen Darian comfort injured fighters, praise their bravery, ensure the children and elders were protected. Nothing like the cold, ruthless Alpha King of legend. Nothing like what she'd expected. "There must be another way," she said. Darian's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "If there is, we haven't found it. The prophecy speaks only of prevention, not victory. Only the healer's heart can prevent the fall of kingdoms." "My heart," Selene murmured. "What does that even mean? Am I supposed to sacrifice myself? Use my healing powers somehow?" "I don't know," Darian admitted. The ancients were fond of cryptic phrases that could be interpreted a dozen different ways. A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the battle below. It should have been strange, this easiness with a man who had claimed her without permission, a king she barely knew. Yet their bond made it feel natural, as if they'd known each other for years rather than days. "I should return to the healing chambers," Selene said finally. "The last attack brought many casualties." Darian nodded. "I'll escort you." As they descended the tower stairs, Selene sensed his inner conflict, the desire to protect her warring with his duties as king and commander. "You don't need to accompany me everywhere," she said. "I know you have more important matters to attend to." "Nothing is more important than your safety," he replied without hesitation. "Without you, there is no prophecy, no hope." "Is that all I am to you?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "A prophecy? A weapon against the Crimson Dawn?" Darian stopped on the stairs, turning to face her. In the dim light of the torch sconces, his expression was unreadable. "No," he said finally. "Not anymore." Heat bloomed in Selene's chest, traveling up to her mark. She resisted the urge to touch it, to acknowledge the connection that grew stronger with each passing day. Before either could speak again, a deafening explosion shook the fortress. Darian instinctively pulled Selene against him, shielding her body with his own, as dust and debris rained down from the ceiling. "What was that?" she gasped when the rumbling subsided. Darian's face had gone hard as stone. "They've breached the eastern wall. Come, we need to get to the inner sanctum now." He took her hand, pulling her down the stairs at a pace that would have been dangerous for anyone without wolf reflexes. All around them, the fortress erupted into organized chaos. Warriors rushing to defensive positions, servants hurrying to secure provisions, healers gathering supplies. They reached the main courtyard, just as another explosion rocked the western side of the keep. Flames leapt into the night sky, illuminating the scene in flickering orange light. The air filled with the sense of smoke, blood, and fear. "My king!" Rowan appeared through the crowd, his face streaked with soot and blood. "They've broken through in 2 places. The alchemist, the one they call the Red Prophet. He's created some kind of explosive that melts stone." Darian's expression darkened. "How many have we lost?" "At least 20 in the initial blast. More fighting to hold the breach, but they're pouring in faster than we can cut them down." The Alpha King turned to Selene, his golden eyes reflecting the flames. "Go with Lyra to the inner sanctum. I'll join you when I can." "No," Selene said firmly. "I'm needed in the healing chambers." "There will be wounded. There won't be anyone left to heal if we lose this battle," Darian interrupted, his voice sharp with urgency. "The prophecy must be protected at all costs." "I am not just a prophecy." Selene's voice rose, drawing the attention of nearby warriors. "I'm a healer. Let me do what I was trained to do." For a moment, Darian looked as if he might argue further. Then his expression shifted, something like pride flickering in his eyes. "Very well," he conceded, "but take a guard detail with you, and at the first sign that the central keep might fall, you retreat to the sanctum. Promise me." "I promise," Celine said, relief washing through her. As if summoned by their conversation, Lyra appeared through the crowd, her silver braid coming undone, a sword dripping with fresh blood in her hand. "The eastern breach is worse than we thought," she reported. "They're using some kind of wolfsbane gas. Our warriors can't get close enough to engage." Darian's jaw tightened. "And the western side?" "Holding, but barely. They have archers with silver-tipped arrows positioned on the hillside. Anyone who shows themselves on the battlements is cut down immediately." The Alpha King absorbed this information with grim resignation. "We've been betrayed," he said quietly. "Someone gave them the layout of our defenses. They know exactly where to strike." Celine felt cold dread settle in her stomach. Who would do such a thing? Someone who believes the prophecy is false, or someone who believes in the Crimson Dawn's vision of the future? Darian's gaze swept over the courtyard, assessing each face with new suspicion. "It doesn't matter now. We fight with what we have." He turned to Rowan. "Take our remaining elite warriors and secure the central keep. If we can't hold the outer walls, we'll fall back to the inner defenses." To Lyra, he said, "Escort Selene to the healing chambers. Post guards at every entrance. No one enters or leaves without my direct authorization." Both wolves nodded, their expressions grim but determined. As they prepared to carry out their orders, Darian caught Selena's hand, pulling her slightly aside. "Be careful," he said, his voice softening. "The mark connects us now. If anything happens to you—" "I know," Selene replied. "The same applies to you. Don't take unnecessary risks." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Is that an order from my queen?" "It's a request," she said quietly. "From your mate." Something flashed in his golden eyes. Surprise, followed by a warmth that made Celine's heart beat faster. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was brief, but charged with meaning that neither was ready to voice. Then he was gone, striding toward the eastern breach with a dozen warriors at his heels, his authority radiating from him in waves that made even the most battle-hardened fighters stand taller in his presence. Lyra cleared her throat. "We should go, my lady. The wounded will be arriving soon." The healing chambers were located in the central keep, a large circular room with beds arranged in rows and shelves stocked with herbs, bandages, and traditional healing tools. Already, injured warriors were being carried in, their wounds ranging from minor cuts to life-threatening injuries. Celine moved among them with practiced efficiency, her hands glowing with healing energy as she addressed the most critical cases first. Some wounds responded immediately to her touch, flesh knitting, blood flow slowing, pain easing, but others, particularly those inflicted with silver or wolfsbane, resisted her powers, requiring more traditional treatments. For hours, she worked without rest, aware only peripherally of the battle raging around the fortress. Through her bond with Darian, she sensed his determination, his strategic mind directing the defense, his occasional flashes of pain when enemy blades found gaps in his armor. Each time, her heart would stutter, her healing momentarily faltering, until she confirmed through their connection that he still lived, still fought. The mark on her neck burned constantly now, as if reminding her of what was at stake. It was near dawn when the tide of battle shifted decisively. A massive explosion rocked the central keep itself, sending cracks spiderwebbing across the ceiling of the healing chambers. Dust rained down on the wounded, and somewhere in the distance, Selene heard the triumphant howls of enemy wolves. "They've broken through the inner defenses," Lyra said, her face pale beneath the dirt and blood. "We must get you to the sanctum now, my lady." Selene looked around at the wounded warriors, some barely clinging to life, others just beginning to heal. "I can't leave them." "You must," Lyra insisted. "The king gave explicit orders. If the central keep falls, you are to be taken to the inner sanctum immediately." Through their bond, Selene felt Darian's desperation, his fierce determination mixed with growing despair as he recognized the inevitable. They were losing. She closed her eyes, reaching along their connection, trying to send him her strength, her support. In response, she felt a wave of emotion so powerful it nearly brought her to her knees. Not just determination or protectiveness, but something deeper, something that felt remarkably like love. "My lady," Lyra urged, Please. Selena opened her eyes, a new resolve hardening within her. I made a promise, she said. Take me to the sanctum. The inner sanctum was located beneath the fortress, accessible only through a hidden entrance behind the throne room. As Lyra led her through narrow passages lit by ancient torches, Selene felt the weight of centuries pressing down upon her. These walls had stood for generations, protecting kings and queens long before Darien. Would they witness the end of his line? The sanctum itself was smaller than she'd imagined, a circular chamber with a domed ceiling carved with runes and symbols she couldn't decipher. In the center stood a raised platform of polished black stone, its surface etched with a map of the 7 territories. What is this place? Selene asked, her voice hushed in the sacred space. The heart of Shadow Keep, Lyra replied. Built by the first Alpha King when he united the territories. It's said to be the most heavily warded place in all 7 lands, protected by blood magic and the spirits of all who ruled before. Selene approached the platform, drawn by something she couldn't name. As her hand hovered above the surface, the runes on the ceiling began to glow with soft blue light. They recognize you, Lyra whispered, awe in her voice. They know you're his true mate. Before Selene could respond, the hidden door burst open. Darien staggered in, blood streaming from multiple wounds, his armor shredded in places. Behind him came Rowan and a handful of elite warriors, all bearing evidence of brutal fighting. Seal the door, Darien ordered, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. They're right behind us. As the warriors rushed to obey, Selene hurried to Darien's side. You're injured, she said, her hands already glowing with healing energy. He caught her wrists, stopping her. Save your strength, he said. We'll need it for what comes. What's happening out there? Darien's expression was grim. The keep has fallen. The Crimson Dawn controls everything above us now. It's only a matter of time before they find the entrance to the sanctum. Can't we escape? There must be secret passages. All blocked or guarded, Rowan interrupted. They knew exactly where to look. The traitor was thorough. Then we're trapped, Selene realized, cold dread settling in her stomach. Not trapped, Darien corrected. This was always our final position. The prophecy ends here, one way or another. He moved to the black stone platform, placing his hands on the surface. The map of the territories illuminated, tiny pinpricks of light showing the location of settlements, pack boundaries, ancient sites of power. The blood moon reaches its zenith at midnight, Darien said. According to the Crimson Dawn's beliefs, that's when the ritual must be performed, when they'll attempt to corrupt your healing powers. How do they plan to do that? Selene asked. Darien's eyes met hers, golden even in the blue glow of the sanctum. By killing me while our bond is at its strongest, then capturing your grief and pain in a vessel prepared with dark magic. The shock of a mate bond severed at the moment of the blood moon's peak would create energy powerful enough to twist your healing into its opposite, destruction. Horror washed through Selene. That's why you marked me, she whispered. Not just to protect me from Marcus, but to ensure the ritual would require your death. You made yourself the sacrifice. Darien didn't deny it. It seemed the most certain way to prevent the prophecy's dark outcome. As long as I control when and how I die, they cannot harness the power they seek. No, the word tore from Selene's throat. There has to be another way. I won't let you sacrifice yourself. It's not your choice to make, Darien said gently. A king protects his people, no matter the cost. And what about your mate? Selene demanded, anger flaring through her grief. What about the bond you created between us? Do you have any idea what your death would do to me? Something flickered in Darien's eyes. Regret, perhaps, or a deeper emotion he'd kept carefully hidden. I never intended to complete the bond, he said quietly. I never planned to claim you fully. It was meant to be a mark of protection only. Yet here we are, Selene said, gesturing to the space between them, to the invisible threads of connection that had grown stronger with each passing day. Whether you intended it or not, the bond is forming. I can feel you, even now. Your pain, your determination, She trailed off, unwilling to name the emotion that had been bleeding through their connection with increasing frequency. My love, Darien finished for her, his voice barely audible. Yes, that too. An unexpected complication. Above them, the sound of battering rams echoed through the fortress. The Crimson Dawn was searching methodically, working their way toward the hidden entrance. "We don't have much time," Rowan warned, his hand resting on his sword hilt. Darian nodded, then turned back to Celine. "The prophecy speaks of the healer's heart preventing the fall of kingdoms. For days I've tried to decipher its meaning, to find another path, but I keep coming back to the same conclusion. My death, controlled and on our terms, is the only certain way to prevent them from corrupting your powers." "No," Selena repeated, more forcefully this time. She moved closer to him, placing her hand over his heart. "You're missing something. The prophecy doesn't say the healer's death or the Alpha King's sacrifice. It says the healer's heart." As her palm rested against his chest, a strange sensation began to build between them. The mark on her neck pulsed with warmth, and beneath her fingers, she felt Darian's heartbeat align with her own. The runes on the ceiling glowed brighter, bathing the chamber in blue-white light. The map beneath their hands shimmered, the territories seeming to ripple like water. "What's happening?" Rowan asked, his voice hushed with awe. Celine looked up at Darian, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Not death," she whispered. "Union. Not sacrifice, but joining." The Alpha King's golden eyes widened as comprehension filled them. "The healer's heart, and the Alpha's strength," Celine finished. Together, without hesitation, Darian pulled her against him, one hand cradling the back of her neck. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Once done, this cannot be undone." Celine smiled, her first true smile since he'd marked her in the Moon Temple. "I've never been more certain of anything." Their lips met as the hidden door to the sanctum began to shudder under heavy blows. The Crimson Dawn had found them, but they were already too late. The kiss deepened, and with it, their bond flared to life. Not just the preliminary connection of a marking, but the full, complete mating of true wolves. Celine felt her power surge, flowing from her into Darian and back again, amplified and transformed by their union. The black stone platform beneath them began to pulse with golden light, the map of the territories shimmering as if alive. From the center of the sanctum, a column of radiant energy erupted upward, piercing through stone and earth, rising into the night sky where the blood moon hung red and ominous. Outside, the invading forces froze as the beam of light split the darkness. Within its glow, they saw their darkest fears manifested, not just defeat, but exposure. The Crimson Dawn's true plans, their centuries of manipulation and deceit, were laid bare for all to witness. In the sanctum, Celine and Darian broke their kiss, but remained embraced, their foreheads touching, their breath mingling. Through their completed bond, they could feel each other completely now. Every thought, every emotion, every desire. "It's working," Rowan said in disbelief, staring at the platform where the map showed tiny pinpricks of light spreading outward from Shadow Keep, racing along pack boundaries and ancient ley lines. The territories are responding. The sounds of battle above had ceased, replaced by confusion, and increasingly the howls of wolves turning against their Crimson Dawn leaders. The prophecy's power, channeled through the union of the healer and the Alpha King, had revealed truth where deception had reigned. "Not the fall of kingdoms," Darian murmured, his arms still wrapped around Selene, "but their salvation. Through unity," Celine agreed. "Not sacrifice." As the blood moon reached its zenith, its crimson light was overwhelmed by the golden radiance emanating from Shadow Keep. Throughout the 7 territories, wolves felt the call of truth and justice, rising against those who had manipulated them for generations. The war that had threatened to destroy everything Darian had built was ending not with his death, but with his most powerful act of life, joining his heart with his true mates, uniting strength with healing, power with compassion. Later, when the Crimson Dawn leaders had been captured and their followers dispersed, when Shadow Keep had begun the process of rebuilding, Darian and Celine stood together on the highest tower. Below them, pack members worked side by side with former enemies, united by the truth the prophecy had revealed. "What happens now?" Celine asked, echoing the question she'd posed during their first conversation by the river. Darian smiled, the expression transforming his once severe features. "Now we rule together," he said, his hand finding hers. "Now we build something new, a kingdom where strength and healing are equally valued, where alphas protect rather than dominate, where omegas are honored for their gifts." "And us?" Celine asked, her fingers tracing the mark on his neck. the matching bite she'd given him when their bond completed in the sanctum. Us? Darian pulled her closer, his golden eyes warm with the love he no longer tried to hide. We learn each other. We grow together. We discover what it means to be true mates, not because of prophecy or necessity, but because we choose it. Celine rose on tiptoes, pressing her lips to his in a gentle kiss. Through their bond, she sent him all her hopes for their future, the family they might build, the kingdom they would shape together, the love that had begun in the most unlikely circumstances. I choose you, she whispered against his lips, not because fate marked me as yours, but because I mark myself as yours. And I am yours, Darian replied, sealing their vow with another kiss as the setting sun bathed Shadowkeep in golden light, heralding a new era for the 7 territories, an era born not from loveless obligation, but from the unexpected union of the Alpha King and the Omega who had changed his heart. 5 years passed like the changing of seasons, each one bringing new growth to the kingdom that had nearly fallen on the night of the blood moon. The 7 territories, once divided by ancient grudges and suspicions, now existed in an uneasy but strengthening peace. Treaties were honored, trade flourished, and the name of the Alpha King no longer evoked fear, but respect. Shadowkeep itself had transformed. Where once stood imposing black stone designed only for war, gardens now bloomed in courtyards that had previously known only combat training. The fortress remained strong, its defenses still formidable, but windows had been widened to let in more light, and children's laughter echoed through halls that once carried only the sound of marching boots. On this particular evening, as the summer sun began its descent behind the Iron Mountains, Celine stood on the balcony of the royal chambers, watching the activity below. Warriors still trained in the main yard, but alongside them, healers practiced their craft, no longer hiding their gifts or treating them as weakness. Young wolves, both Alpha and Omega, learned side by side, each valued for their unique strengths. "Mama!" a small voice called from inside. "Mama, look what I did!" Celine turned with a smile as her daughter came running onto the balcony, her golden eyes, so like her father's, wide with excitement. At 4 years old, Luna was a perfect blend of her parents. Darian's strength and commanding presence combined with Celine's compassion and healing gifts. Her dark curls bounced as she thrust a small wooden carving toward her mother. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Celine said, bending down to examine the roughly shaped wolf. "Did you make this all by yourself?" "Uncle Rowan helped with the cutting parts," Luna admitted. "But I did all the sanding. He says I have a healer's touch, just like you." Celine's heart warmed at the pride in her daughter's voice. In the old world, an Omega child would have been taught to value only submission and obedience. But Luna was growing up knowing her healing gifts were to be celebrated, not hidden. "Where are your brothers?" Celine asked, suddenly aware of the suspicious quiet. Luna rolled her eyes in a gesture so reminiscent of Darian that Celine had to suppress a laugh. "With father in the throne room. There's a delegation from the Eastern Pax, and the twins wanted to see the important wolves." The twins, Alexander and Elias, had just turned 3, but already showed the assertiveness and curiosity that would one day make them fine leaders. Unlike Luna, who had manifested as an Omega early, the boys seemed destined to be Alphas, though Celine and Darian had agreed that designations would never determine their children's worth or opportunities. "Well then," Celine said, taking her daughter's hand, "perhaps we should join them. Your father might need our support with the delegation." Luna nodded seriously, always eager to participate in royal duties. As they walked through the corridors of Shadowkeep, servants and warriors alike bowed respectfully to their queen and princess. 5 years ago, the sight of an Omega being shown such deference would have been unthinkable. Now it was simply the way of things in Darian's kingdom. The throne room doors stood open, revealing a scene that still sometimes surprised Celine. Darian sat not on an elevated throne, but at a round table similar to the one in the council chamber. Beside him were 2 empty chairs, one for Celine and one for Luna, while the twins sat on special cushioned seats, their eyes wide as they observed the visiting dignitaries. The Eastern Pack representatives looked uncomfortable with the arrangement, clearly more accustomed to traditional hierarchies where Alphas dominated and Omegas served. But they were adapting, just as all who wished to maintain alliances with the Shadow Kingdom had learned to adapt. When Celine entered with Luna, Darian's eyes immediately found hers, their bond humming with warmth and connection. Even after 5 years, the sight of him still made her heart beat faster. He had changed since the night of the blood moon. The hardness in his face softened by years of peace and fatherhood. The golden eyes that once burned with constant vigilance now capable of gentleness and humor. But the core of him, the strength, the intelligence, the unwavering devotion to his pack, remained unchanged. He had simply become more fully himself, unburdened by the need to appear invulnerable. "My queen," he said, rising as they approached. "Princess Luna, we were just discussing the implementation of healing centers in the Eastern Territories." Celine took her place beside him, Luna climbing into her own chair with practiced dignity. "And have our Eastern friends come to a decision?" she asked, smiling at the visiting delegates. The lead alpha, a grizzled wolf named Thorn, shifted uncomfortably. "It is unconventional," he said carefully. "In our territory, healing has traditionally been a private matter, conducted by pack elders behind closed doors." "As it was here," Celine acknowledged. "But we've found that public healing centers reduce suffering, strengthen pack bonds, and ultimately create stronger warriors. When injuries are treated promptly and properly, fighters return to duty faster and with fewer long-term limitations." She had learned over the years to frame the benefits in terms that traditional alphas could understand, not just compassion for its own sake, but practical advantages to overall pack strength. Thorn nodded slowly. "Your results speak for themselves. The Shadow Kingdom's warriors are renowned throughout the territories. Yet you've had fewer deaths in training and border disputes than any other pack." He glanced at Darien. "We will try it, Alpha King, for 1 year. If the results are as you describe, we will establish permanent centers." "A wise decision," Darien said, his tone carrying neither condescension nor triumph. "My mate will assign healers to assist in the initial setup. They can train your own Omegas in the techniques we've developed." As the discussion continued, Celine felt a tug on her dress. Alexander, the more impatient of the twins, was growing restless. His dark hair, so like his mother's, fell across eyes that were a perfect replica of Darien's. "Mama," he whispered loudly, "when will the story start?" Elias, slightly smaller but typically the more thoughtful twin, elbowed his brother. "It's not storytelling time yet, stupid." "Boys," Darien said, his voice gentle but firm, "remember what we discussed about respectful language." Both twins straightened immediately, though Alexander still fidgeted in his seat. Celine hid a smile. Her sons might be young, but they already understood the expectations of royal children, even if they didn't always meet them. The meeting concluded with handshakes and formal promises, the Eastern delegates departing with expressions ranging from cautious optimism to lingering skepticism. When the throne room had emptied, Darien leaned back in his chair with a sigh. "That went better than expected," he admitted, reaching out to ruffle Elias's hair. "What did you think of your first diplomatic negotiation?" "Boring," Alexander declared promptly. "Important," Elias countered, always eager to contradict his brother. "But yes, also boring." Luna, who had remained perfectly poised throughout the meeting, finally allowed her formal demeanor to slip. "Can we go to the Moonlight Garden now?" she asked eagerly. "You promised we could have our lesson there today." The Moonlight Garden had been Selene's first major project after becoming queen. Located in what had once been an unused defensive courtyard, it now bloomed with healing herbs and flowers that glowed silver under the moon. It had become a sanctuary for all in Shadowkeep, but especially for young Omegas learning to develop their gifts. "Of course," Darien said, standing and scooping Alexander up onto his shoulders in one fluid motion. "Your mother has been looking forward to it all day." The family made their way through the fortress, guards and servants bowing as they passed. In the garden, already bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, Lyra waited with several other young wolves, Omega children from various packs who had been sent to learn under Celine's tutelage. "My queen," Lyra greeted, her once severe expression softened by the years. She had become one of their most trusted advisors, and Luna's godmother, her initial skepticism about an Omega queen long since transformed into deep loyalty. "The students are prepared for today's lesson." Celine nodded, then knelt to be at eye level with Luna. "Are you ready to lead the warm-up exercises?" she asked. Luna's face lit up. Though still young, she had begun assisting with the teaching of newer students, her natural empathy making her an excellent guide for other Omega children, just beginning to explore their healing abilities. As Luna took her place at the front of the small group, Darian moved to stand beside Celine, one arm wrapping around her waist. The twins, immediately bored by the healing lesson, raced off to the far end of the garden where Rowan waited to begin their own training and more physical skills. "Do you ever wonder?" Darian asked quietly, watching their daughter guide the young healers through basic energy movements. "What would have happened if I hadn't interrupted your wedding that day?" Celine leaned into his warmth, their bond humming with contentment. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I look at our children, at what we've built together, and I know it couldn't have been any other way. The Alpha King, still feared by enemies, still respected by allies, but now beloved by his mate and children, pressed a kiss to her temple. The prophecy spoke of the healer's heart preventing the fall of kingdoms," he murmured, "but it never mentioned how completely that heart would transform the Alpha Kings." Celine turned in his arms, rising on tiptoes to kiss him properly. Even after 5 years, the connection between them flared bright and powerful, the mating bond as strong as the day it had completed during the blood moon. "I love you," she whispered against his lips, "not because of prophecy or fate, but because of who you are and who we've become together." "And I love you," he replied, his golden eyes warm with emotion that only his family ever saw. "My queen, my mate, my heart." As the sun set over Shadow Keep, casting long shadows across the kingdom they had transformed together, Celine looked at the family they had created. Luna, teaching with confidence, the twins sparring under Rowan's watchful eye, Darian standing strong beside her, and knew that this was the true fulfillment of the prophecy. Not just preventing the fall of kingdoms, but building something stronger and more beautiful from what might have been ashes. A kingdom where strength and healing walked hand in hand, where alphas protected rather than dominated, where omegas were honored for their gifts, and where love, not duty or fear, formed the foundation of pack bonds. And at the center of it all, an unlikely pair, the Alpha King who had learned that true strength came from compassion, and the Omega healer who had discovered her own power in standing firm for what she believed, united by fate, bound by choice, and transformed by love. If you enjoyed this story, a like or comment really helps. And if you wish to hear more tales like this one, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next tale.